Angelina. It's about 15 seconds.
Next time to light it.
I'll get that line next to me. Maybe they did that on purpose. Good afternoon, and welcome to the advisory committee meeting for Franklin County Parks and Recreation Department. We'll start this meeting by having a round the table introduction. If you tell your name and the best, just one word about being here today at this meeting. We'll start with you, Thomas. One word.
So Thomas Gold, Principal Park Planner. I've met many of y'all now, so thanks for being here. Happy.
Oh, love it. Right. Okay, Miss Jill.
I'm Jill Carter. I'm the project manager for the Open Space Bond. And my one word would be excited.
Be good. We're happy you're here. We're excited you're here.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
My name is Kevin Conricode, and I'm a board member. And I would also say excited.
Great. Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Derek Turno, board member, and I am feeling excited because I passed the food truck inspection. So
Very nice.
so,
Good, good.
I'm Ann Babcock, and my one word would be Greenway opportunity.
That's two words. That would be Ann's word. Anybody's gonna be Greenway, so. Yes, ma'am.
Lynn Perry, Franklin County Parks and Recreation, program manager. What everybody else is.
That's great. That's great. Carol Peterson, I'm happy to be here too. So that seems like a great.
I'm gonna have to come up with another word for happy. Lena Richards, District 3, and I am Bill. Allison Danes, Parks and Recreation Director. And I was feeling inspired. I'm inspired. I think there's a lot of great things going on, and I'm inspired to see participation and to be a part of everything that's happening in the county.
Great. Okay, with her mouth.
Just water, thankfully. Allie Howell.
Yourself in one word or maybe more than one. Being here today.
Grateful,
Very good. Very good.
grateful.
Well, that's a really pleasant way to start the meeting, and it's just a real pleasure to be here with you on this beautiful day. This meeting is being live streamed, so and we're excited to have people tuning in, and we hope for any participation that you would like to bring to this group, either by attending our meetings or turning in an application to join forward. So we'll start with that. You each received a copy of the minutes. There's also a copy of the minutes of our last meeting at your station there. But if I would entertain an approval to approve the minutes, a motion to approve the minutes.
A motion to approve the minutes.
second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Very good. Thanks. Minutes are approved. Ms. Alice, Director's report.
Yes. So two things, just really quick, I did want to start off with the information that the community recreation grant deadline has passed and closed, and we are very excited to say that we had 31 applications for community recreation grants. So we're very excited about that opportunity, and over the next couple of weeks, we have formed a committee that will be reviewing those applications, scoring them, and then we're moving through that process. And I believe we've got some representatives from the board here that are a part of that process. So thanks to everyone for that. And then with that, I did want to go over presentation about Spiny Mountain. For those of you who did not hear, there was a presentation at the briefing, the last briefing that we had, that we are in conversation with the Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy, and they are looking to coordinate and collaborate working with the county for a potential park or reserve. And so I just want to go ahead and give you the update about what it is we're talking about, and then we'll have some discussion about it. So this is called Spivey Mountain. It's actually has two different names. Based on the portion of Spivey Mountain, it's also known as Deaver Mountain or Deaver View Mountain. The portion that we are discussing is right here. You can see it's located in the Deaver View community, or you can get there off of Deaver View Road or off of Spivey Mountain Road on the opposite side. So there's two entrances to the way, but there's only one entryway to actually get onto the property. The other side doesn't actually connect to this property. It goes through some private property first. So what you're seeing here, that picture over there to the left is from the top, looks over downtown Asheville, the Biltmore Estate. If you look down to the lower right-hand side, when you turn off, you can see to the south, that is Mount Pisgah in the background there. And you can see here kind of distances from different points throughout the county, how far away it is, just to give you an idea of its generalized location. So to pull up and look at a map, we all heard about the tragic fires on Spivey Mountain. And again, thank you to the firefighters and first responders who responded to that and got that under control. That fire was not a part of this property. So the property that you see here, that is the 342 acres of area that we are discussing. And again, it was not affected by that fire, but that is the part of land that we're talking about here. Just to let you know, right now, this property is currently owned by a single person who's choosing to remain anonymous, just acknowledging themselves as a conservation-minded person, individual who's interested in the potential of preserving this piece of property, which was up for sale. It was originally up for sale for $10 million. And this person is working with the Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy. They've given them a 3-year option to raise the funds to purchase the land as a potential for county donation. And so the way that that works right now is the Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy has gone for a grant for about $4.3 million, as you can see up here, meaning that there's an additional $4.5 million that would be needed in order for them to solidify the purchase of this property, as they're anticipating a project total of about $8.8 million or so. The reason that that number can change is because if they raise the money needed earlier within the 3-year option, the price goes down. So if they take the full 3 years to raise the money, that's the potential price that you're looking at for that piece of property. So this picture here is important because of the 342 acres that we're talking about, the SAC, as they're known, is doing a conservation easement, right? So they've applied for that grant that I just spoke about. And what basically would happen is approximately 95% of the property would be under conservation easement. And when you look at this picture here, that little yellow box there down to the lower right-hand corner is the parcel that is not considered under conservation easement. That's also where the legal access exists to get onto this piece of property. There is a dirt road that has been cut in right now that allows for access up to that point. So conservation easement, what that means for that piece of property is that what is permitted there are unpaved trail developments allowed. It does allow for parking lots within the easement, as well as restroom facilities, things such as storage sheds or covered picnic shelters. You could put an observation or viewing platform up there if you chose. And then it would allow for things like trailhead or educational kiosks also within that conservation easement. And then it does allow for proper maintenance of trails and view sheds. And so that picture that I showed you at the beginning that had that spectacular view, for a conservation easement, you could maintain that view shed to keep that view. So the expected timing of this, so as I said, SAC has a 3-year option, which means that they could potentially have the money for this property and have purchased this property by early 2026 potentially. And then if it was to be turned over as a donation, as a potential park or preserve, improvements would be able to start up there for that type of activity no sooner than 2027 at the earliest. So as I said, I brought this conversation to commission, and the commission had requested board action, and what it is requested staff to move forward with approval for a resolution. And I do want to, I know that it's up there, you can read it, but I'm going to just read it just so that everybody's really clear. So the 3 approved resolution points that we're going forward with next board meeting will be that the Buncombe County Board of Commissioners has the intent to explore creating a county park or preserve for passive recreation and educational opportunities for our community. The second point is that staff has the direction and ability to partner with Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy on seeking state and federal funding. And the third is that staff may proceed with any due diligence required for the establishment of the property as a park or preserve. And so that will go to the next commission meeting, I believe on the 18th, for as an approved resolution for the commission. And so with that, I open it up for discussion. That's just kind of a very high level view of where we're at and what that piece of property is.
We're proposing paying for this out of the open space recreation funds from the recent bond issuance.
That has not been proposed right now.
Do you mind stating that again?
I was just asking if we were proposing that $4.5 million bridge to fund that with open space bond funds.
Right.
However, it has not been
It
proposed.
has not been proposed.
To me, it seems like a pretty good candidate for the funds and a pretty great fit. Are there any concerns with this property not falling into the guidelines of the open space bond?
No, I think we're working on the criteria right now. We're finalizing the criteria. So based on what we're seeing so far from criteria, again, it's not finalized,
Mhm.
but it seems like it would be a project that could potentially apply for those funds. Yes.
So I'm just trying to understand, we are going to approve asking the county commissioners to explore this. Is that,
The county, so commission has asked for a resolution
From
from us.
okay, so
to
that's what we're,
explore-
as it was written.
Yeah, that's the resolution. They've asked for a resolution to come forward for us to explore the potential of this property as coming over to the county as a potential park or preserve.
And right now, all we're looking at is money from the LWCF fund that it has a potential.
Mhm.
Are there any strings attached to the LWCF money? Like, would that be approved without additional money, local funding?
My understanding is, no, that it's not contingent upon other fundraising, but the only, the requirements of the conservation easement, so it would require conservation easement. And so what I showed up on that other slide, it would limit the amount that you could develop on that piece of property. So it would amount that you would not be able to say, you couldn't build a community center, for example, on that piece of property. It's in conservation.
The conservation easement doesn't limit the civilian access, like a walking trail can, we've got the full 340 acres potentially
Correct.
for trail.
Correct. Yeah. And there are some existing, just so that you know, so I said there's an initial entry road that is existing right now, but we don't know the full condition of it. We need to look at it. And again, it's the same thing. There's also trails that currently exist on this piece of property, and so those would need to be evaluated. That would be part of the due diligence, that those trails are appropriate, that they're an appropriate grade and not just kind of, trails that deer have made and humans have followed.
So there is no access to Spivey Mountain Road nor Stearns Cove Road on the other side of the watershed?
Not currently, there's not.
Okay.
There, because it goes through private property in order to access it on that side. So there would need to be conversation about that with those folks.
So Allison, get down to the nuts and bolts of it.
Mhm.
They're wanting a resolution from this committee for the staff to look into. Can we go back to?
Oh, I'm sorry. So the resolution is actually going to the commission.
Correct.
So that's what we're in the process of creating a resolution.
From this board for them to proceed in some way, depending on the three things that you have posted.
No, the resolution is coming from staff. So I'm just informing you all of that. So they're not asking us to create a resolution. They've asked staff to create a resolution to explore those three items.
Okay.
Yep, and I can go back to that. Oh, there it is right there.
There's so many things I'd like to say. There's many things up in the air about this as far as I'm concerned. We have the passive open space.
Passive recreation.
Yes, ma'am. I never can get that word.
New term for.
We are in the midst of developing a plan, a long-term plan for your department.
Correct.
If the county gets this land, then it's not just acquiring it for that amount of money, it's a continuous operation and upkeep of this land in perpetuity.
Correct.
And installation of any improvements after they purchase it, right?
Say that again.
Installation of any improvements after the purchase, like the parking lot
Correct.
and things like that.
It's like somebody said one time, Carolyn, what to give your horse,
Right.
you don't give anybody a horse. You have to shoot the horse, you have to feed the horse, you have to ride the horse, you have to love the horse, which we did. They gave us the horse. I just think there's so many things, I'm talking too loud, but I think there's so many things to think about. Can we look at this resolution and let's have some real discussion about it? Anybody?
Well, basically, what we're saying is we like the idea and we'd like to see the Buncombe County Board of Commissioners pursue it further with the help of staff input.
Well, so the resolution, basically, I'm informing you of the resolution. The resolution is gonna move forward.
Oh, we did, okay,
Like
sorry, that's already.
Staff is moving, staff has been directed, so I've been directed by commission to come forward with a resolution for exploring this piece of property as a potential county park location. So that direction was given. So I'm informing you all of the direction that I've been given for this piece of property and kind of explaining it to you all and what it is. And so it's up for you all just to know the information, and then, if you have particular feelings, you have concerns or you have supports that as a board you want to express outside of that, that is totally within the right of this board.
One thing that I would like to say, and if you could, Allison, in making this presentation to the commissioners, if you could have some sort of introductory remarks prior to explaining this resolution, saying that we are in the midst of working with the open space passive fund.
The bond fund, yeah.
We are in the midst of doing a long-term plan for Parks and Recreation. We have a lot of balls in the air. We have a lot of projects going on. In the midst of that, there is interest in this, but it's not the only priority from our department. Are y'all nodding that that's Sounds okay? To put some things out there that are happening, Derek.
I'm wrapping my head around it all. I mean, I'm still, I've digested this slide as it reads requested of the commission, not this board, but the commissioner's action.
Right.
And
Sure.
this is kind of telling the commissioner and Allison's staff is like, in order for us to do this, we need the commission's permission to do the due diligence required to establish the park. Yeah. That's how I read this, and I totally support it. I think it's a great idea. I think the Buncombe County Parks and Rec should look forward into the development of this park. You know, do a request to have the trail conditions evaluated, whether it's from Sorba or another nonprofit. You know, I think this is, for me, just kind of getting permission from the county commissioners to move forward with this project. And I as a member of this board, I wholeheartedly agree.
And I think anybody who's a member of this board or a member of the staff of the Parks and Recreation Department is all for anything we can add to the recreation opportunities for our citizens. I mean, I think that's our goal. I'm just expressing personally my concern for another thing added to the plate when there's so many things that are having to be checked.
To your point there, I don't view this as necessarily another ball in the air, as it already aligns with the bond funds that have been passed. It aligns with things that the voters of this county have already stated that they want out of the Parks and Recs Commission. So to me personally, it doesn't feel like another iron in the fire. It feels like an opportune moment to access the bond funds that have already been approved. And it really like aligns with the vision that we're trying to do. And it does bring quite a bit of additional park land in. And to an earlier point of nobody gives you a horse. We could get a little bit of feedback from the park board as far as like estimated running costs of this as passive land. I imagine to be substantially lower than like the sports, Buncombe County Sports Park, because there isn't routine mowing. The overview is a large grass field. It's the one you can see all throughout town. If you don't know which one Spivey Mountain is, if you're heading west on Haywood Road in West Asheville, it's that grass field. So also from the conservation side, from the Ag Center, some of their goals of wanting to preserve Buncombe County as Buncombe County, I think this aligns with their goals as well, as I don't think there are many citizens here who would want to see that 300 acres developed for homes. I think this project isn't an add-on. I think it very well fits like a puzzle piece into a lot of the goals that a lot of different organizations within the county are trying to achieve.
This is why we have an advisory board.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, time frame too, we're a few years out on this project as well. I mean, I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of work to be done as you get there, but if they don't even raise the money, it's kind of a neat point, right? Although I'm sure they will raise the money.
If the commission does, or the staff encourages the commission to move forward with this, then it would be added to the master plan as part of the process, since you guys are working on the master plan for your department, that would be incorporated into that.
Yeah, I'm sure it would be something that would be evaluated as a potential, if it were to be a piece of that.
Move forward.
You took my comment.
Oh.
I was also gonna inquire about the funding, so I like how the section bullet in the resolution sort of leaves it open-ended and not limited to a WCF. So are there other funding agencies that Southern Appalachians are exploring, like RDEP or anything like that would help offset the cost?
Yeah, I can't speak to the specifics of who they're working with right now, but I know that they are exploring other opportunities and grants and even potential individuals.
Private donors or.
Correct. Yes,
I'd just like to say, a couple of years ago, we read a report that evaluated parks and recreation departments around the country and percentage of their budget that's used for staff, but also what percentage of land is dedicated to parks for people, for access to people. And Buncombe County rated, as we remember, very, very low in acreage that was available to citizens for use as public parks. And to bring in 342 acres into the park system, whether it's passive or active, I think is a great opportunity to expand access, especially in the western part of the county, so that we can have recreation access available to people within a 10-mile radius, which is one of the things that had been suggested. And to do it with the possibility of LWCF funds and maybe even open space funding from the bond. We're really not talking about taking county funds and buying anything if that all works out. But it's a great opportunity to expand parkland in Buncombe County, which we need badly.
anything else, any other comments? Questions?
May I say one more thing?
Yes.
There has been a lot of publicity about this. I'm sure this may not be the first time you've seen it. There's been an article in the Citizen Times online last week and then one over the weekend, the printed edition. There's also the LOS has done a spot on this, and ABL Today had it out there online. So plenty of information out there about this. Did you get all you needed?
I did. Thank you very much. And we'll be checking in periodically with you all for sure. As we move forward. With that, I'm going to turn it over because we do have Thomas and Jill here to talk about greenway criteria.
Yeah, so kind of switching gears here, we are going to be talking about the greenway criteria, and since the last time we talked about it, back in February, where we came up with some initial kind of draft criteria that we had come up with, quite a bit has happened, quite a bit of public engagement has happened. So as we all introduced ourselves earlier, you met Jill, she's our new open space bond project manager. So she's going to walk us through kind of the overall process and stuff, and then go through some of the results of the public engagement, and then I'll go through our revised criteria and walk us through how they kind of evolved.
Thanks, Thomas.
So,
as Mark said, since we first presented that draft criteria to this board back in February, a lot has happened. So we wanted to come back and share the results of our public engagement and how that's being incorporated. But first, I did want to just give a brief refresher on the bond itself. As most of you, I believe, know, the open space bond is allocating $30 million towards 3 different types of projects: land conservation, greenways, and passive recreation lands. Each of those 3 project types is going to function as its own application process for receiving proposals, reviewing, evaluating them, and recommending projects for funding. Currently, our team is in the process of developing that evaluation criteria for each of the 3 project types and bringing them forward to commissioners for adoption. So that is why we are here today. Over the past month, we have taken a big public engagement campaign. Part of the goal of the bond team is not only to be really transparent with the public about the status of the bond itself, but also incorporating the public voice in how we design these bonds. The public voted for this bond last November, so it's really important that we understand what kind of projects they want to see come out of the open space bond, how they view the benefits of the different types of projects, how they prioritize the different criteria that we're going to be evaluating, as well as just additional, priorities they might have. So to do so, we have kind of used 4 different tools. The first of which is our public input website, which has a screenshot here, and that QR code would take you to that website as well. This website, in addition to just providing great overview of the bond, it also has some great examples of Greenway projects. It provides the overview of the draft criteria, and it allowed the public to provide public comment on our process so far. We also have gotten some great media coverage, including stories in Citizen Times, WLOS, and Asheville FM. In addition to just putting the story out there to the public, these stories helped us reach a much wider audience, and we used them to drive that audience back towards the public engagement campaign. Additionally, we had 2 stakeholder and community events. The first was a stakeholders meeting that actually took place here, and it included stakeholders from different municipalities within Buncombe County, different greenways advocacy groups, and other stakeholders in kind of the conservation space. Then a week later, we had a public meeting out in Swannanoa that was open to the general public. Between those 2 meetings, we had about 47 people attend in public, and then we had several people attend online as well. We were able to use these meetings to not only talk about the draft criteria that we proposed, but also get their feedback and answer their questions about our process. These pictures show those attendees participating in an activity we did where they could comment on the specific draft criteria themselves. So these meetings gave us a lot of insight, not only into how we could refine the draft criteria, but also into how we could refine our process more broadly. And then lastly, we put out a public input survey. We used the meetings, the media coverage, and that website to drive people towards this survey where they could express their opinions in writing about our draft criteria. And we had 189 people respond to this survey, so we got a pretty good participation. And now I'll go over the results we received. So the first question that we asked on this survey is we put forth that draft criteria that the staff brought before this board back in February, and we asked respondents to rank that criteria, with the number 1 being kind of their top priority and number 8 being their lowest priority. And pretty clearly, connectivity came out on top. Over 40% of the respondents, or about over a third, sorry, not 40%, but over a third of respondents had connectivity as their number 1 criteria. And that's a theme that you're going to see throughout the other results as well. Connectivity is a big priority amongst the people engaged in this process. And connectivity was defined not only as connectivity between different greenways, but also connectivity between neighborhoods, connecting communities to things like parks, schools, and businesses. And it, again, was just a recurring theme throughout this process. And then after connectivity, environmental impact and accessibility also both ranked fairly high, with each of them getting about 40% of respondents having them as either number 1 or number 2. The next question that we asked in this survey actually came out of that stakeholder meeting. During that meeting, we had a great conversation about how different users of greenways use them for different reasons, and that reason for using a greenway and the benefit that you get from a greenway can impact the types of projects that we receive and how they are scored. So we wanted to get a sense of how the public would prioritize the different benefits of greenways. And again, connection came out on top. I think over 50% of the respondents put that community connection as either their number 1 or number 2 benefit of greenways. The other benefits came out pretty much even, except for economic development, which you can see was the lowest scored benefit of greenways. I won't spend too much time on this slide, but equity was one of those original draft criteria that we had put forward. And throughout our internal conversations, as well as the conversations we had publicly, it became very clear to us that different people have different definitions of equity and different understandings of what equity looks like. So we wanted to use this survey as an opportunity to ask the public how they define equity and how equity relates to greenways. And just some of the key themes that came out were, investing in these underserved communities, making sure everyone in Buncombe County can access these greenways regardless of ability or location. Again, connection and connectivity between communities, reducing harm of the greenways, both to the neighborhoods that they're in and to the environment. And then finally, improving access to economic opportunities. And then the final question that we asked on this survey was soliciting additional criteria suggestions. And pretty, I wouldn't say overwhelmingly, but a huge one that came out was safety. A lot of the comments that we received pertained to safety on the greenways, not just in terms of protecting people from cars and those types of accidents, but also ensuring that there's good lighting, that there's patrol, and making sure that people feel safe when they are on a greenway. Connectivity, again, came up, but in this question, a lot of that connectivity question was around making sure that the projects funded through the bond are part of a larger greenway system, and that we're kind of thinking strategically about the greenway network. Again, not only minimizing the negative environmental impact, but also being very intentional in how we are conserving the environment and protecting the environment in greenways by using native plantings, habitat enhancements. And then finally, the last kind of big additional criteria that came out was around funding and wanting to make sure that we use these bond funds efficiently by leveraging other funding sources. And then just some other considerations that came out of the conversations we had in this public engagement campaign had to do with wanting to have longer greenways, essentially, like larger geographical connections. The question of long-term maintenance of these greenways, not only in terms of safety, but cleanliness and upkeep. And finally, there was a big prioritization of the local story and how these greenways benefit our local community, rather than just appealing to tourists. That was another key consideration. So again, this survey and this public engagement process was not only really eye-opening for us, but it had some very direct implications for how we refined the criteria. So I will pass it to Thomas to talk about that.
Sure. So the last time we talked about the greenway criteria as a board was February. We came to you all with these initial kind of criteria. And the feedback we really heard back from that particular meeting is that we needed to add accessibility to the list. And again, these are kind of those, whenever we receive comments about like what we want our greenways to be, we have to put them into kind of an overarching category. Like a lot of the comments fit within these bigger categories of things, and that's what we're talking about when we're talking about criteria. So we heard the feedback and we said, yep, you're right, we need to add accessibility. So before we went to our stakeholder meeting in March, we actually added accessibility to the list. That was the major change that happened. And then from the stakeholder meeting, we really heard that the costs kind of bullet actually needed to include kind of a leveraging of funds component that wasn't necessarily directly related to project costs, but was a very important part of greenway funding. So we added that particular kind of criteria within the cost bullet point as well. And after all of the input that we received through the public input campaign, this is kind of where we're landing now. We actually have two separate types of criteria now. So we have a qualifying criteria, we have 4 of those, and then we have weighted criteria. And the weights and the percentages you see there are directly related to the feedback that we received in the public engagement campaign. So the qualifying criteria, leveraging of bond funds, project scheduling and timeline, Feasibility study must be complete, and the geographic location, the project must be located within Buncombe County. So those are all yes, no questions. And if you are not able to answer yes to any of those, then you will not qualify for Greenway bond funds. And then the weighted criteria are in addition to the qualifying criteria, and that there will be extra things that we want to evaluate each of the projects on based on these specific things. And I'll kind of walk through them specifically. So again, here's the qualifying criteria and the questions that we will be asking for those. And again, they're yes, no questions. So I don't think I have anything else to add there. So getting into the weighted criteria, as Jill was saying, connectivity was one of the highest, if not the highest, kind of feedback and concerns that we heard from the public. And she mentioned it as well, but what we're really talking about is connectivity to many different things. So we're talking about greenways connecting to other greenways and regional trail systems, state trail systems. We're talking about greenways connecting people, their jobs to their neighborhoods, to commerce and other community services such as parks and schools. We're talking about greenways connecting along transit corridors so that we can reduce vehicular traffic on commutes. We're talking about greenways making connections within multimodal transit systems. So, you might see a greenway that may not look like it connects to much, but it may connect to a bus stop that also connects to a sidewalk, which, utilizing all three of those types of transportation, you were able to make something that you weren't able to make before. Then connecting neighborhoods and municipalities, that was a thing that we actually heard a lot in our public meeting, is that, they would like to see like adjacent municipalities and neighborhoods actually connected. And then whenever the opportunity presents itself, being able to connect greenways with our blueways as well. Environmental impact was another very highly ranking criteria, and spoke about this as well, but that we really want to do some things with our greenways to turn them into more green infrastructure. So minimizing stormwater runoff and incorporating stormwater control measures and rain gardens whenever possible. We'd like to see land management and maintenance plans. Something that came out is, we want, the maintenance of these greenways to be such that we have, plant mitigation for invasive species going on along these corridors. Anytime there's interpretation and education opportunities, we'd like them to be taken advantage of. We'd like for, there to be programming or signage if possible. We want to emphasize other low impact development techniques. If there's things for opportunities like pollinator gardens, rain gardens, community gardens along the alignment, we'd love to, prioritize that. And then again, a consideration for our river ecosystems. And then anytime we can reduce kind of that vehicular impact via, reducing commutes or any other trips that one might have to make using an automobile, if they could do it on the greenway, that's definitely a plus for us. So accessibility, that's another one that ranked high. So we're talking about a lot of things when we talk about accessibility here. So there's going to be some design guidelines that our greenways are going to have to abide by, given the funds that we use to build them. So we're definitely taking into account things like ADA accessibility at trailheads and all access points. But we also want, there's a safety consideration within this accessibility component as well. We want them to be safe for wheelchairs, strollers, and cyclists. Some of this safety actually comes out of people knowing their greenway etiquette. Then we want it to be accessible to traditionally underserved communities within the county. We want it to be, have accessible transitions from bus stops to trailheads so that we can take advantage of those multimodal opportunities that I spoke of earlier. We want to have adequate parking spaces at trailheads for ADA spaces. Another thing for accessibility is making sure that we have adequate bathroom facilities and potable water available at all of the trailheads. A sense of safety is a key factor when you're talking about accessibility, because if you've provided the physical accessible design for the place, but people don't feel a sense of safety and they're not able to utilize the place because they don't feel safe, then it's not truly accessible. And then again, there was an emphasis on, you know, if there's opportunities for access points to and from Blue Ways, to take advantage of those. Feasibility. So if you notice that feasibility was a qualifying criteria as well as a weighted criteria. So we are requiring feasibility studies be complete for any project that be presented to us for greenways. But as you may imagine, not all feasibility studies are equal. So in addition to the feasibility study being complete, we would like to look at things such as, does the project have partner and stakeholders along the corridor that are willing to participate? So that's one thing we'll be looking at. That could be, you know, letters of support from landowners along the corridor. We'll also be looking at things like the environmental status of parcels along the Greenway corridor. Are we actually able to build given the environmental status of those parcels? We'll be looking at things like topography, hydrology, and other geographic features that may be obstacles. As you all know, that there's a lot of stuff that may be feasible to build if you have enough money to build it. If you have enough money, you can do pretty much anything, but we have to consider those obstacles and how much the cost of it. Then we have to look at, in greenways, you basically are looking at 3 different phases of a project. You're looking at the design, you're looking at the right-of-way acquisition, and you're looking at the construction. And we're looking at, if we are able to provide bond funds for a particular project, will it fully fund those 3 phases? We'll look at other things too, in terms of feasibility, in terms of, you know, right-of-ways that we'll have to cross, bridges, railroads, roads and other crossings. All of these things are also obstacles that just need to be navigated. The next one was that it needs to be identified as a countywide need, opportunity, or priority. And it can be identified as this need through a number of different ways. It can be in our Greenways and Trails Master Plan that's completed in 2012. It can be identified in a regional or multimodal master plan. It can also be identified in a local municipality's Greenway Master Plan. And even if it's not identified, if the project is presented to the review committee, county staff may identify it as the new countywide need. This is an acknowledgement that, you know, our last Greenway Trails Master Plan was completed in 2012. There may be new connections that need to be addressed that are not addressed in that particular plan. Equity is the next component. We've spoken about a little bit here, but what the feedback we really received on what we need to consider when we consider equity is it needs to directly serve traditionally underserved communities. A kind of a common thing that, or a thing that we heard from the public meeting actually is that, you know, the unincorporated communities within the county are at a disadvantage when applying to stuff like this because they don't have the staff or the organization really to spearhead some of the application process for these particular projects. People want to see these projects adjacent to existing low income or senior housing so that those people have access to them. They want to see design for safety, like I just talked about, making sure that everyone feels safe when using them. They want to make sure that we include the community and engage the community throughout the design process whenever we're undertaking these particular projects. They want to make sure that, you know, any neighborhood that's along the Greenway corridor that we're providing a connection to that, not just specific neighborhoods that are picked and chosen along the way. Again, they were just wanting to make sure that the communities were engaged prior to and during feasibility study so that nothing was a surprise to the communities when projects were moving forward. So leveraging bond funds was another one that was a qualifying criteria as well as a weighted criteria. So kind of the nature of Greenway projects in this area is that the funds that we're going to use for them are going to be leveraged. But in addition to that, we want to make sure that we're prioritizing projects that are leveraging their funds at a higher rate than others. So essentially making sure that the county's getting the biggest bang for their buck when we spend Greenway bond money. So we want, and in doing so, we're also considering other things like project costs. So when we're looking at, the project's projected costs, that we're looking at things like making sure that the project has planning level contingencies, so higher level contingencies. We're including, we're making sure that, as I stated earlier, that once we include the bond funds, that the project design, right of way, and construction are 100% funded. And then, we're making sure we're utilizing all different types of funds that are accessible to us, like funds from the NPO, the TPDF, part of the Land and Water Trust Fund, when applicable, like project to utilize as much of those funds as possible. And then we're well aware that there's some probably projects in the county that have probably sat on the shelf for a while. So making sure that all of those project cost estimates are up to date when we're evaluating these projects. And then safety is one that we added after the public input. It's kind of baked into a lot of the other criteria that I've already talked about. But in addition to that, we wanted to make it its own criteria as well, given the input that we heard. So again, designing for safety to mitigate potential pedestrian and vehicular conflict. And this is one that happens by default, given the nature of the Greenway project. When we work with civil engineers in order to do these projects, they actually have to abide by certain AASHTO guidelines whenever they come into, like a vehicular intersection, or if there's retaining walls and such like that. They have a certain level of guidelines or a certain manual that they have to go by in order to keep everybody safe. But in addition to that, we want to design for things like safety to mitigate crime. Some feedback that we heard is, just making sure that, there's at least management plans in place for any crime that may happen along those corridors. And a big part of that we heard was, we need to make sure that there's a maintenance plan and a litter management plan. It's kind of like making sure everything's neat and tidy along the corridor. Not only for environmental reasons, but also for beautification efforts. If the project calls for things like emergency call kiosks, then we would give them extra points for that. And then, again, back to this public information and signage for Greenway etiquette. There are a number of greenways around our county. However, they are relatively new and they're currently so disconnected that it's oftentimes you're working with different rules of etiquette when you're like on the road versus on the greenway. So just making sure that people know that when they're on the greenway, they're following the proper greenway rules. So again, that's our now 8, even though some of them overlap, now 12, even though some of them overlap criteria for qualifying are 8 weighted criteria. Sorry to bore you with very heavily text design, but that's where we're at.
We just want to get you an idea of what's coming up and where we're going with this. So today we're obviously sharing this refined criteria with you for your feedback and input. And we're also going to be sharing it with those stakeholders that were involved in the process as well, so that they can, ask additional questions and provide other input. In May, we are hoping to bring this final criteria back to this board for approval, and then ideally taking the criteria to the commissioners for adoption in June.
So, I don't know if you all have any questions or thoughts or.
I think one of the best things that happened is to hear these two, I was going to say young folks, and they are, come with fresh eyes to Buncombe County and give their perspective. For Thomas to say greenways, going from one greenway to the other, and there's no connectivity, no etiquette from one, the kinds of things that you all bring to a discussion about this is really enlightening for folks like Miss Ann here, who's been involved in the Greenway project in Buncombe County for a long time. But to have this board, fresh eyes, and a new director here coming with this criteria, pulling it together is great. This has been a great presentation. Have any thoughts or comments or questions that you have of Thomas or Jill?
I had a quick question. When talking with folks who are residents of Buncombe County, is there anything that is in an individual's power or collectively to help help their project? Because everybody lives in a different corner of town. Everybody has a greenway that they would prefer to see jockeyed up, if you will. Is there anything an individual or a group of individuals can do to help with a feasibility study, connectivity, anything along those lines?
I'll let Thomas speak to the feasibility. I don't know about that component, but in that equity criteria, part of that is wanting to make sure that we are going to these communities before the projects were to be selected and understanding, here's 2 possible projects that could be in your community. How do you feel about them? And we want to make sure that we're incorporating that public input and feedback throughout the whole process. And that's a great opportunity for members of Buncombe County to express we know this greenway is applying for bond funds and we're really supportive of it, and getting to hear that will, I think, play into that equity component of the criteria.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the piece that's huge is getting the kind of letters of support from landowners along the corridor. That's not something that's typically required of a feasibility study, but it's a huge piece of getting the greenway built. So, I mean, that would be one way that I could see a greenway being prioritized maybe over another. Just if you just had ready and willing landowners on 100% of that corridor, then that's a huge obstacle to overcome. So that would be the main thing that I could see is something like that.
I think generally speaking too, if I could add, one of the reasons that we're excited to be able to put out the criteria and have some of the specifics is so that folks that are doing these types of projects can really look at the criteria and assess themselves and be like, okay, where are we at? We've got some time to pull some things together, and then they can bring that together and make a stronger case for it. So I think by virtue of having some time to evaluate, once the criteria is adopted and everyone agrees upon them, now opportunity to follow into those.
So I just want to get straight the logistics of the criteria, because we are going to be evaluating the applications as a board for Greenway funding. Is that correct? So, well, I guess my question is, you will have a form set up so that you have over here, you have the qualifying criteria, and that we can just say yes or no to each one of those. And then over here, you'll have the weighted criteria, and that could be debatable, or, I mean, are you just going to go by percentages, or is there input that this group will have on each one of these things?
So our proposed process is that the staff they'll score the proposed projects of using this criteria, and all of those scored projects will come to this board. You'll be able to see how the staff scored them, why the staff gave them those scores. You can also score them yourselves if you think, we gave it a low score on equity, but you think it actually does pretty well in meeting that criteria. Like, you have the ability to make those judgments as well. And then this board will be the one selecting which projects to recommend to the commissioners for that funding. And it may be the case that one project scored really high by the staff, but there's another project that still scored high, maybe not as high, but it's just more feasible and it's more of a priority as aligned with, I guess, county needs or county desires for how recreation is going to look moving forward. So that's kind of the process that we're proposing is the staff will do an initial score and you'll be able to see how we scored it given the criteria there, and then you'll be able to make an additional assessment and select which projects to move forward.
Well, that's kind of leading up to, wanted to ask about the can we go back to the feasibility slide? Okay, so under that, you have design right of way and construction fully funded. That's a huge ask for some of the people that might be applying for this funding to have the design paid for, the right of way identified, and the construction fully funded. I mean, that to me looks difficult.
It is, I don't know a way around it, but essentially what that's, the concern, I guess, that is addressing is that, say we get an application for $500,000 for a particular greenway, and that $500,000 is only gonna get you through design,
Right.
and nothing else is funded. And we've essentially, and then essentially like the timing requirement of the bond is gone, then we don't have anything to actually show for that particular project. So that's an attempt to do. Yeah, it's something we can consider, but yeah, I mean, it is a huge ask. But I don't know how the county is gonna be able to have spend on projects and not deliver anything. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, Greenway is so expensive.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, that's a great point.
we're only talking here about $5 million. And,
It's a great point.
So I think that the thing to remember is that this is 15% of a weighted criteria. And so how you're leveraging other funds, I think that's kind of what the point is are you leveraging other funds to the point that it's making your project be able to come to fruition? Or at least really, really close to it. I think those projects are more attractive than a project that is like, well, we have design and that's it. Or we don't have, we're not even at the full of, like, you know what I mean? Like, I think, so it's a scale, it's not a yes or no. The thing to remember is that this is not a yes or no, and you get dinged. It's a culmination. It's a part of a percentage of the full view that you're looking at. So it's not just feasibility and then looking at these individual and that's it. You know, it's part of the full conversation, remembering that there's other criteria that are weighted at a different rate. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So obviously
yeah.
something that's more
It's a
fully
really-
funded, something that's more fully funded, obviously we're gonna be like, well, yeah, why would we not want it? And it actually makes a greenway. Of course, that would be something like you have a greenway at the end of it.
I want to be clear too, that means that design right of way and construction is fully funded if you were to accept the bond.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm not saying like, you gotta be fully funded and then like, you could be awarded bond funds. But to Allison's point too, that is why this particular bullet point is within the weighted criteria and not the yes, no criteria. Because I understand it's gonna be hard, but it's also the nature of how greenway projects work is that, you know, the contract is written for all three of those phases essentially. So like, even though I've kind of divvied it out into the three things there, for instance, the two that we're kind of currently managing, we're working through those processes, but we have the money for all of it. If that makes sense. Like, so,
Yeah, I can see design done, but not construction and right-of-way acquisition, because they're so expensive.
Yeah, and that's just the nature of those projects, right?
I'm gonna step in here right just a minute. I just checked the time and I know we try to keep these.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have
meetings to
2
an hour.
votes.
There are a couple of, if I could say, wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. A lot to digest. You can go and pull it up on Facebook, Buncombe County.
gage.buncombecounty.org.
There you go. And digest it all you want to. And further questions through Allison to either Thomas or Jill, I know they would respond quickly.
Yes.
There are 2 board items here that I'd like for us to consider that need a vote. Passive Recreation Bond Advisory Board, we need to add 2 additional members to that. And we would like for Lena and Kevin to accept nominations to that. If anyone would like to nominate that recommendation, I appreciate it. Ann has moved that. It doesn't need a second according to our bylaws, but if you just raise your hand that you approve those 2 nominations, I appreciate it. Okay, congratulations.
Can I point out that my name is Susan?
It
should be Richards.
Oh,
It happens.
You said it.
she'll still I had a meeting with Allison last week, and one thing that came up that I recommended to them, and they're agreeing to this, is that we move our board meetings from monthly to quarterly. The option to add a meeting at any time when it's needed. So we need a board approval for that. Be held anytime our bylaws, if the chair calls the meeting, or if 3 members of the committee call the meeting. So I have a recommendation that we change the bylaws.
I'll move.
What, I mean, why quarterly?
The business is coming up so that it can be handled, Allison and I talked about this, it can be handled on a quarterly basis. If anything comes up that can't be, then we can have a call meeting, Zoom meeting if we need to, but right now, our quarterly meeting would suffice with what they need to share with us.
I'll move to have the meetings moved quarterly.
All those in favor, raise your hand. All right, very much. Also, Allison has information about meetings that are going to be held to try to.
So just really quickly, we do have 2 vacancies right now on our board, and the county is undergoing boards and commissions there. And you can see here that there's 3 different dates, May the 18th, May the 20th, and then June. That date is being solidified. But from 4 to 6 on May the 18th at the Grove Street Center, there's going to be a table held there, and if anybody would like to come to any of these, staff will be going there to look to recruit a more diverse group, get it out to the community and explain what it is that we do and kind of what the commitment is. And so just wanted to make you aware of those dates, and if anyone who is able and willing to attend, to potentially talk to potential board members to come and do that with us, but staff will also be there, obviously. So we're actively working to really increase our reach and do it in a pointed kind of way.
Do you know which districts that we have opening for on our board?
I believe one of them is District 2.
Okay.
And I will make sure, we will double check. I believe the other one is, I'm not sure. I know there's one for District 2, but we'll make sure that everybody is.
I think it's, I forget the numbers of the districts, but the northern bit of the county, there's an open seat there, and the eastern bit, there's an open seat there.
But we have them, so we'll make sure. So we just wanted to make you all aware of those 2 things that are coming up. With that, the next meeting is next Tuesday. I'm taking over for you, sorry.
No, you go right.
The next meeting that we are planning is May the 2nd, and the reason that we are planning May the 2nd is an off one. And it is because we're really trying to work through those greenway criteria, because again, you're gonna put out what you just introduced to, we're gonna put that out to folks again, give everyone another look, get feedback, so if there's additional feedback or what that is, we'll take whatever additional feedback and come back to you all in May the second review when we're looking for final approval, so we can make it to the June commission meeting.
Thank you very much. All right, good meeting you very much.